Welcome everyone to this joint Canadian Wealth Secrets and David Edey webinar. We're going to be get going just in a minute. If you are getting here, get yourself settled. Let us know in the chat, whereabouts you're coming from, and also maybe a thing or two about maybe what your industry is. Maybe a little bit about yourself there as well, and we'll get rolling here with David.
Yeah, it's always great to see where people are coming to us from. Actually, David, let people know where are you coming from, and we'll get ourselves going here in just a moment.
I'm in, Vaudreuil, which is just outside of Montreal, just across the bridge. So I'm here in Quebec. So we're, I guess, Eastern Canada. Well, I guess we're all over
Very
Canada.
nice.
Yeah. Most everyone here will be, so probably my guess is from all over Canada. We're from the southwest side of Ontario, but we always love to see where everyone's coming from. So folks, if you can get in the chat, let us know that. Get your typing fingers ready. We'd love to hear that at the Canadian Wealth Secrets team.
Yes, and as people are doing that, we are going to get ourselves started here, and we want to dig in with David, who specializes in estate planning and legacy planning. So without further ado, David, tell us a little bit about your backstory and what you specialize in helping Canadians. And in particular, today, we're going to be talking about business owners, succession, legacy, and estate planning.
Well, first off, I want to thank you guys for having me. This is a truly an honor. Get to have this conversation because this is the least sexiest topic that you guys probably will ever talk about. Nobody wants to talk about death, and nobody wants to talk about legacy planning. But through your work, I've followed you guys, and you're out there putting all the important information that people need to know about. So I'm really honored to be here. So I want to first off thank you for having me.
Of course.
How it started for me, I was sitting in a cold courtroom bench. I was listening to a lawyer, two lawyers, and a judge determine the fate of my parents' assets that my family did not end up holding on to. And it's all started from 7 years, 10 court appearances, and $50,000 in lawyers' fees. Settled my parents' estate, and they had a will. And I ended up writing my book during the pandemic, Executor Help, How to Settle an Estate, picking an executor and avoid family fights. And that was all due to every time I would talk about what I was going through, I would hear about from a client, because I've been an advisor for over 40 years. I'd hear from a client or I'd hear from a friend. When I would talk about what I was going through, they would tell me, you know what, I know of a family that's gone through that, or I've gone through it and I'm no longer talking to a brother or a sister, or there's a family disagreement, we had to go to court. So I didn't want people to go through what I went through, and I ended up writing the book. And since then, even though I've been an advisor for over 40 years, since the loss of my parents and then writing the book, my practice is leaning towards more estate and legacy planning, because I found out that there's so much information that needs to be put out there, and also there's the discussions that have to take place, because a lot of people, again, this is the least sexiest topic that you guys are going to talk about.
Hey, I'm interested for sure. That's why I want to have this conversation. So let's chat about the will, because I think, like, when you said, like, all of that happened and you still had a will, like, tell us, like, because I think a lot of us will think we got estate planning, we got succession planning, like, but I mean, like, we all go like, let's get a will in place as our very first step. And I think a lot of us will also go like, that's great when I have this will and I got a corporate will, but like when we have that, we assume that it's all going to be fine when we have that in place. So tell me about, like, the horror stories here. Like, why is this not just good enough here?
Okay, first off, you were assuming that most people have a will.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Like, I was thinking, I have a will.
But for probably between 45 to 50%, yeah, and probably 45% and up of Canadians don't have a will or an updated will. And that's probably because most people either want to avoid the topic, they procrastinate, or they say, you know what, I'll be dead. What difference will it make? Let the family deal with it with that. So what's I found out through my research and talking through people, that even though the will is the focal point, most families don't have the conversations. So most families will fall into three categories. There's the one that if we talk about death, something's going to happen, so we don't want to do that. So let's stay away from it. Or there is a will in the family, but nobody talks about it. So they let the paperwork do the talking once they're gone. And then there's the third type of family, the family that they recognize that they're that passing away. Actually, I should give a spoiler alert. We're all going to die.
Yep.
So
Not if, when.
Yeah.
exactly.
What a downer.
So, spoiler alert. I know. So the third type of family, they realize that this is going to happen. It's a natural progression of life, and they want to pass on the legacy. And when I talk about legacy, it's not just possessions. It's not just the money. It's about values, traditions. They want to pass that on. And making a will, having the open family conversations is what helps families continue on great traditions. Traditionally, when there's an inheritance, it's probably between 65 to 70% of the inheritance doesn't make it to the third generation. And that's also because there's no conversations. There's no conversations of what's going to happen. The matriarch or the patriarch, they don't have the conversations, or there's family disagreements and no one wants to really touch the subject. And it only becomes an issue when there's a death in the family. So yes, the will is important, but most people don't even have that. And today there's no excuse not to have one. You could go to a lawyer, or here in Quebec have a notary and have it professionally done. Or you can go online and have a will done. A company like Legal Wills or Willful, you could have a will done. So there's no excuse for not having a will.
Got it. And obviously that would be the first step, but you've already mentioned about half of Canadians either don't have a will or they don't have an updated will, which is obviously problematic. But there's also some common mistakes that you've mentioned to us in the past that I'm curious if you could share here. Like, what are some common mistakes that actually, although the will's in place, might lead to some family fights, maybe even tearing the family apart? Like, what are some of those common mistakes that, might be some landmines we might be able to avoid when we do update our will?
Well, you say family minds. In year 5 of my podcast, I call it family messiness. All families are messy, whether we want to admit it or not. So, and you really don't know about somebody until you have to share an inheritance with them. So the most common mistake is that there's no conversations around the will. Yes, we've written a will and then not preparing the executor. So, not preparing the will properly and not having the conversations and not preparing the executor, those are where we end up with the landmines. There's damaging family fights. Our courts are filled with families in court right now fighting over cottages. They're fighting over businesses. They're fighting over money. And when I was doing the research for my book, a mediator told me that it was common for, once parents had passed away, that the children would end up fighting over the estate. What's happening now is that the children are now fighting with the parents for their inheritance before they pass away. So our courts are filled with that, and that it comes back down to the basics of not having open family conversations.
Right. Fill me in on this. I've always wondered about this too, is that this is years ago, because when I had a corporation, my lawyer was like, "Hey, you should have a second will." I think it's maybe not commonplace for everyone to know that maybe we should have that, but I'm still fuzzy on why I would need that second will. Would you be able to shed some light there for us?
Well, you would have your will, which have the assets,
Right.
but I don't know if it's a second will or is it a succession plan? Because as a business owner, that's a whole, an individual who's employed, the will is fine, but as a business owner, there needs to be a succession plan. I like to use the example of Tony Hsieh, if I could share that story. He owned Zappos, an online shoe company, and they're in Las Vegas. If you've ever gone to Vegas, you've seen how it's built up, partly due to the fact of Tony Hsieh. Anyway, 2009, Amazon bought the company for $1.2 billion. He pocketed probably about $214 million from the sale. His estate was his net worth went to about $850 million, and he was very philanthropic. He was known in the community, and you would figure that he was well organized. I mean, come on, he's almost a
Right.
billionaire. When he suddenly died in 2020, and his family went into the home, they found post-it notes everywhere, all over the wall, and there was no will, no succession plan. So what ended up happening was the family and the courts, they had to sort out all the businesses and all the promises. And that became a slow and messy job that put a lot of burden on the family because it didn't allow them to grieve properly. So all of our conversations today should be about how we're going to leave a legacy and not a legacy in a mess like how Tony Shea did. So as business owners, we're busy working on the business every day, but we're not thinking about what's going to, if something was to happen, not just death, but could be a disability, could be a divorce. What's going to happen to the business? And there's only going to be three options. You could say that you want the business to continue, you want to sell it, or you're going to shut it down. But nobody knows what the outcome of that business is going to be if there's no succession plan. How is it going to pass on to the next generation, or if you're going to sell it, or if you're going to sell it to the employees, or you're just going to close the doors, which could bring hardship to the employees and also to all your creditors, people that you've done business and you owe money to. So the second will, or I would call it a succession plan, needs to be in place, especially for business owners. You have your will, but also have the succession plan as well. What's going to happen if you were no longer there for the business?
Got it.
I'm curious about, as business owners ourselves, and I'm sure those who are joining us here today, a lot of them are from the Canadian Wealth Secrets community and they're listening in. Many are business owners as well. What would you maybe recommend in terms of like timelines? How much time is it per week? Is it per month? Is it you put one day on the calendar that you hammer through, all of these ideas? Like, how do you get someone to sort of take that first step in order to start this planning process? Because I mean, we can list all the things that we should have or should have in place, but I think one of the biggest challenges we run into is like, when are we going to do it? And like, how much time is that going to take me? So how would you get someone maybe started on this pathway? I'm sure it's not going to be all done in one afternoon, but like, what does that look like and sound like to you if you were going to help someone take that first step?
And that's because it's not sexy. So
Right.
So we're going to have your team of professionals. So I would start the conversation with your lawyer and talk about that you want to set up, you want to have your will done. You're thinking about it could depend on your family situation. Maybe you've just had a new addition to the family, or you've been divorced and you've never had a will, or you had a will before, it needs to be updated. You're going to have to pick a time where you're going to decide to have this conversation to get the ball rolling. So you're going to have the conversation with your lawyer and to get the conversation started, not only for the will, but also for the succession plan. And it also comes into play, which is also important, is who do you choose as the executor? Everybody, 80% of most people choose an executor. It's usually a family friend or a family member, and they take on the job because it's an honor. But
Right.
this is the worst job that you could
Right.
put on anybody
Mm.
because 90% of most people have no idea what to do, where to start. And on average, it takes anywhere between 18 to 24 months to settle an estate. In my case, it was 7 years. And you're asking someone to spend over 100 hours. I'm not, time they're going to have to take away from their work to settle your estate. Now, if you add to it's one thing to be an employee, but if you add into the mix a business and the individual doesn't know anything about the business, and they're
Mm.
the ones making the decisions for how the businesses are going to go forward. Again, if there's no success, there is a succession plan. They still have to learn how are they going to sell it, the shares, are they going to sell it to an employee, how is it going to continue on? So you're going to have to also prepare your executor. And far too often, you need an executor when you're alive, but you need to prepare. No, you need an executor when when you pass away, but you need to prepare them while you're alive.
Mm.
And the more you could help them, the easier it is going to be on their job. And on top of that, you're asking someone to deal with there's I counted maybe 100 to 115 different tasks you're asking an executor to do. And you need to prepare them as best as possible. So that mean you're going to have your team of advisors. So you're going to make sure they know where to talk to your lawyer, how to talk to your executor, to your accountant, how to talk to your financial advisor. Those are the basic team members that you want to have in place to make it easier on your executor. And on top of that, you're asking the executor to put up, they could be grieving the loss of you, the individual, but also you are asking them to deal with family members. And again, I've said you really don't know about somebody until you have to share an inheritance with them. And this is where we run into problems because the executor also is not, could be privy to, family dynamics where some people get along, don't get along, and they're going to be put in the middle of the family messiness, the drama. And it doesn't take much for somebody to want to take you to court as the executor, and you're being held responsible for making sure the estate is settled, or the business, and also not only the estate but also the business, what's going to happen to it.
Right. Right. I can imagine that. Like I never thought of that as when you think of an executor, you think, oh, you're going to manage this, but the business all has to be thought of as well. And it makes sense to loop in, the team, the lawyer, the accountant, the advisors, the business partners. Like that's where my mind went when you were talking about this. Like treat us for as an example right here. Like Kyle and I are 50-50 business partners in multiple businesses. What are some of the, what do you, I guess, call blind spots that typical business owners and especially partnerships have when it comes to succession planning and also comparing that to estate planning? What should we be on the lookout for between the two of
Well,
us?
it's the discussion if, God forbid, something happens to you,
Right.
to either or. Because, say, for example, I don't want one of you to disappear, but say one of you disappears,
It's not me.
does the other one want to be in business with the family member?
Right.
And
Right.
does the family member understand the business? So what's the mechanism that your surviving partner can buy out the family? If there's no mechanism and there's no money for it, now you're in business with a spouse or a child who has no idea of the day-to-day or the dynamics between the two of you. So you need to have the conversation. What if something was to happen? Not even death. What if one of you ended up disabled and you're in the hospital and you
Right.
can't speak for yourself? So add on another layer to the estate plan. You want to put in your power of attorney. Say, for example, use you guys as an example. Probably, I don't know the banking situation, but you probably need two signatures for some of the businesses.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if one of you is laid up and you can't get signature signed to pay the employees?
Right.
So all of these things you have to take into consideration in terms of the what would happen to the business, and not so much if someone dies, but if there's a disability and or there's a sickness and they can't come into work.
Right. Right.
Mm.
And like you said, mechanism, like share some common mechanisms. Like I know what we have in place, but maybe we're missing. Like maybe this is where a blind spot for us is right now.
Let's talk about digital assets.
Okay.
You've got all those passwords and logins.
Right.
For every one email address, there's probably about 160 digital identities related to those passwords. So it's not only your personal ones at home, Amazon, your personal emails, but there's also the digital assets that are related to the business. What will happen there? If you haven't got a place, or each other doesn't know if something was to happen, where could we get our hands on all the logins and passwords for the company? We're so tied into the digital age, but you've not only got your personal, but you add in the business side to it, and that could also become a mess. That could also slow down the business.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm imagining like there was something I put into place a number of years ago on the personal side. Like it was a binder. It was like a binder that was like, I had all the digital assets information, I had all of our insurance information, all of our, details, and whether, gosh forbid, like I passed away or my wife, or we both passed away and someone needed to kind of step in and look after our children. So at the time it was like this binder, this family planning binder is what we called it. And I'm imagining that something like that, like, is that, like, I know you talked about a red envelope at some point. It's like, is that a red envelope situation?
Yep, that's part of my family legacy blueprint. So you've got all that paperwork, but you're also going to put it in a brightly colored red envelope.
Right.
Okay, because if something was to happen in the family, and you told the executor, if something was to happen, look for the bright red envelope. And the reason is for that is when an emergency happens, people are traumatized, and you can't find anything when you're traumatized. So if you're saying, yeah, I know everything's in it, but if you were to say, John, to somebody, if something was to happen, all you need to do is go in the filing cabinet, or it's kept in a safe, and here's how to get into the safe, and look for the bright red envelope. So once they see the bright red envelope, it's going to be a breath of fresh air, because they know
Hmm.
once they open up that bright red envelope, inside there's going to be the will, the
Right.
power of attorney, the digital assets, your investments, your assets, your mortgage, everything that they need to do. They need to carry on the job that you've entrusted in them to be the executor. They've got it there in their bright red envelope.
Right. Now, think about business owners. Like, is it commonplace for us to like in the business office or have something similar to that, or is that like
Absolutely.
right? Go ahead.
Absolutely. You'd want to have your own, because again, you've got your home life, and you've also got the business life. Even though the two of them might intertwine, they're still two separate entities. So the same thing that you're going to do at home, you're going to have a separate set of protocols for your red envelope for the business, so that again, something was to happen, we don't have to run around. We know what's the procedure, what's going to be, here's the insurance policies for the business, here's what the succession plan is, here's who you need to contact, all of those things there. Again, it's to make it easier on anybody. Think of this as the greatest gift of love that you could give to your family,
Hmm.
that you've got it so organized. Every time I talk to individuals and they go through it, or they get my family legacy blueprint, they say that it's so much easier because now they've taken a weight off their shoulder. They have not left their families disorganized and in chaos.
Right.
Because again, when you can't find things and you're traumatized, you've got grief, you're just looking for stuff. But if you say, you know what, they told me where to look for it and everything's going to be there, then it just takes a weight off of everything. That's why I say it's the greatest gift of love that you could give to your family.
That's a huge win for sure. And I know for me, I look over, I've got a large filing cabinet sitting there. There's a lot in there, but I'm telling you, it would take quite some time for people to
Are you
sort away.
are you telling me that's where I should go? That's your red envelope?
That's my red envelope for now, John, but I
Wow.
don't wish that on anyone. It's
Wow.
not a gift.
Wow.
Not a
Trouble. We're in
gift.
trouble.
So you just threw that out there. I got a big giant filing cabinet. John, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where we're at now.
Thanks.
Exactly.
Everybody else heard that. So head on over to Kyle's filing cabinet if you want to get all his details.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, really, what I think this, this conversation we often say on the podcast, a lot of times when we are opening and going down the rabbit hole and bringing on guests to discuss is like helping ourselves selfishly try to figure out how do we do things better. Everyone's always told about a will. Everybody's always told about keeping it updated. Everyone's told about, keeping things organized and make sure that, everyone in your family or in that immediate space knows where to go. But over time, those things drift. So, this is something that has been on our radar. I know, John, you did your binder a little while ago. I did partial binder a while ago, but I am definitely
Kyle, we
not
need to
nearly
fix
as
that.
organized.
He does. I've been nudging him.
Yes,
Kyle?
But mine's
100%.
mine's also out of date because big things change after a few years.
I know. We are here to learn with you,
Yeah.
my friend. We are here to learn.
I feel like I feel like this
It's
is a confessional right now.
Yeah,
You're
it
confessing
is.
your sins right here. I like to say that intensive care is no place to find out that there's no will, and
Right.
you can never
Yeah.
have a meaningful conversation with anybody when they're on a respirator.
Right.
So again, I come back to this is the greatest gift of love that you could give, not only to your family, but clearly between the two of you, your business partner.
For
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. Well, and so I want to come back to this and say, is there like a schedule that you would recommend so that, for example, as business partners, John and I, or I would also argue, you and your spouse, right, are partners in life, right? So you have to, like, what does that schedule look like that you put on? Is it semi-annually? Is it annually? Is it every couple of years that you have it so that we have got this in the calendar and we're going to come back and we're going to review things together? What does that look like and sound like for you? Or is there any sort of starting points that you might,
Well,
direct people to?
I would say first off, you want to start today if you haven't done anything. But if you've already done something, then I would say anytime there's ever a major event in your life,
Mm.
then you would go update the will, go make the changes and make sure that it's inside your red envelope. Especially if you had children. I talk about in my book, a friend of mine, his parents didn't have a will. So his mom had passed away when he was younger. His dad passed away, didn't have a will, and he remembers distinctly in the parking lot of the funeral home, he's his one aunt took his sister and one aunt took him. And he remembers that because there was no will, every time they needed money for school outings or for educational purposes, they had to go petition the court because now the court is now in charge of all the dollars for the child. So that's if you have children, you want to make sure that you've updated the will, you've talked to the guardian, and you picked a guardian that you're both happy with, and make sure that your kids are taken care of as they get older. So they might be of school age, but they reach 18 or 19 or 20 years old, and you haven't updated the will. And if something was to happen to you, if you go look at the will, it might still talk about the guardian or the trust that you had set up for them when they were children. But now they're older now, and you've got assets and you want to pass those assets on to them. Again, like I said, anytime there's a major event in your life, you need to make those adjustments.
Got it. Got it. I know that you've talked also about like a 90-day family legacy framework. Like you talk, is there something that you also mentioned your blueprint? Can you fill us in on some details so that we all kind of walk away with going like, hey, I know there's more to learn from David.
So, well, the family legacy blueprint is what I came up with. It's just a three-step process in terms of create an estate plan, which we talked about, because we're talking about business owners, you want to have not only the estate plan, which is the power of attorney, end of life decisions, and also you've also got to add on the succession plan. And then the second part is to prepare your executor. Prepare your executor as best you can. Don't leave them out in the cold in terms of what do I do? Because you're asking them to do a really tough job. And on top of that, they're on the hook for making sure that the taxes are paid, and they also got to make sure that the beneficiaries are paid. And the beneficiaries, they're not interested in, the 100 hours or the time off that they had to take for the executor, what they got to do for the job. They're only interested is where's my check? Where's my inheritance? So that's why as the executor and you're preparing them, you're also going to let them know that they need to keep the beneficiaries aware of what's going on. Maybe it's a Zoom call. Maybe it's an email every couple of weeks. Hey, the house is up for sale, but I can't get it sold. I'm going to have to, have some repairs done on it so it can be sold properly. So all of those things. So you have to prepare the executor for the job, not only for the job of, the business part of it, but it's also the personal part where they're going to have to deal with beneficiaries. And again, if there's family messiness, it only makes the job even worse. And then the third part to the family legacy blueprint is talking to the family. Don't let the paperwork do the talking once you're gone. So that means having a family meeting. You might do it over the holidays. I don't suggest doing it at the Christmas table.
Yeah.
Pass the cranberry, and oh, by the way, you're not in the will. I would wait a couple of days and say, hey, I want to
let the
get
meal
together.
digest.
Sorry?
Let the meal digest before you tell them, right?
Exactly. But I wouldn't even do it at the table there. I say either I wait a day or so when everybody's, they're trying to get over the turkey or whatever, and and you want to say, you know what, I want to have a conversation. So as parents, you might say, we're thinking about, we've updated our wills and we just want to have a conversation with you. Now, are the kids going to hear this? Absolutely not. When my parents they came in our office and they did their will. And even though I've sat through hundreds of sat through meetings, sitting with the lawyer, the day my parents came in the office, I couldn't sit in and listen because I could not fathom my parents not being there. And that's probably my biggest mistake. And that's probably one of the mistakes how we ended up with, being in court for 7 years. Because my parents didn't have the conversations with us. I mean, I knew what was in the will, and it should have been split 3 ways. But again, you really don't know about somebody until you share an inheritance with them. And there's one sibling who believed that they were entitled to more. So hence we had to end up to go to court. So when you have those family conversations, you're going to explain, who you chose as the executor. Are there going to be hurt feelings? Probably.
Right.
But you know what? You're getting it out there. People are going to be upset. And that's what a lot of families hold back on, is because they know the dynamics of the family. They know the dynamics of some of the children and the relationships that they had. And what they'll do is they'll hold off, and because they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But by having those conversations, nobody can come back and say, I didn't know. I
Right.
didn't know what's next. They didn't know what the end of life decisions would be. You could be in the hospital and mom and dad said, hey, I don't want to be kept alive artificially. There's going to be a fight saying, no, this is what mom would want, or, let's just talk to another. If you follow along with what mom and dad said, remember what mom and dad said? They don't want to be kept alive artificially.
Right.
So it's hard, but we need to pull the plug. That's
Yeah.
it. But they've had those conversations. And most families aren't going to have those conversations. I have two brothers who don't talk to each other because their mother left Royal Dalton, China to one son. And when they were cleaning up the house, the other brother went to the brother and says, you know what? I'd really like that Royal Dalton, China go to my daughter. He said, go talk to my wife. He went over to the wife. The wife said, no, your mom wanted me to have. Came back to him. I'm not gonna say what he said about
Right.
his sister-in-law, but they haven't talked for 12 years over
Oh my
Royal
God.
Dalton, China.
Right.
So if mom had said, hey, I want this to go to this person, that to go to that person, we wouldn't have those conversations. But a lot of
Exactly.
families have broken up over nonsense.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's something that I had heard recently in a presentation as well, around this idea that, if you don't have the conversation, you're basically setting up the executor to be the one to take the brunt of whatever the decision was.
Absolutely.
Right. And that, to me, I think is like a massive takeaway from this conversation, is that, we need to be, first of all, we need to get clear when we talk about our 4 stages of a healthy wealth plan. The first stage is vision, right? And that's planning your vision. Well, the same is true here, right? Planning like for what you want to happen all the way through. The vision doesn't stop when you leave here. It's what happens after we leave here as well, right? What do we want to see happening, and addressing those things? Because here's the interesting part. Mom may have left those, that China thinking nobody else wanted it. And that's why she decided to gift it to, her son's spouse. And, she might have thought that that wasn't a big deal, but had she heard that from the children, maybe your decision would have been different. Right. And to me, that's like a massive takeaway, as we, don't just make these decisions and let it be, but to let people in on these conversations. And I would argue that if you do it productively and if you do it often enough, you're going to strengthen your family bond instead of doing the potential opposite, right? Which can be accidental, but can be lasting, as you've just mentioned.
Yeah. And I think the other takeaway, Kyle, is that you need to fix that filing cabinet. just
100%.
Just an observation.
Yeah.
You throwing out that other one, I'm like, really?
Wrong.
Yeah, take the Via on down from from Montreal all the way
Yeah.
down here to Windsor, and give me a little slap over the head. And it is something. Just recently with my real estate partner, actually used to be a co-host on the show. We just updated shareholder agreements, so we're slowly working on these things. But I think this is one of those pieces that it has to become something that's on the forefront. And I appreciate people like yourself, David, to bring this back and make sure that this is top of mind, because with so many things happening in the world,
Kyle, even though I'm pushing it a little bit, this is not sexy. Nobody wants to do this. Nobody gets up and say, you know what, tomorrow I think I want to talk about my shareholder agreement. I think if something's to happen to me, I think we should talk. Nobody wants to do this, but it has to be done.
Right.
If you think about what will happen to your family, so you've got to make the decision. What kind of legacy do I want to leave? Do I want to leave it as easy on my family, or do I want to leave a mess and leave disorganization and chaos?
Right. Now, here's a question that I think lumps into this was a question from Sunil, who's here viewing with us today. But it was also kind of linked to a question I wondered about the executor, and thinking about, I know that this might also be resolved if you properly educate your executor. Because my wonder was if a business owner, is it better to choose a third-party executive or your spouse? But if you educate your spouse along the way, you might not necessarily need to do that, because there's probably some benefits for your spouse to be the executor. But Sunil's question specifically was, is it worthwhile to have a trust company be your executor, and what are the pros and cons there?
That's a good question, Sunil. There is no right answer,
Mm,
but what I would say is if you want to take the drama and you want to make it easier on your family and have that third person, because they're not interested in, you don't talk to your cousin or your cousin thinks you're an
right,
idiot.
right,
Trust company don't care. So, but you have to I say that with a caveat is that understand it'll depend on the size of the estate because there are going to be fees involved.
right,
And you know, some beneficiaries might say, you know what, hey, all the fees are being eaten up by the executor. So you have to decide what makes more sense. If it's take away that the drama and they're acting as a business because they don't know the rest of your family from a hole in the head, and they're just doing their business and they're going to charge a fee, and what's left over it'll be left to the beneficiaries, then that might be the route. Especially if you have a business and it's going to be pretty complicated, and depending on what your succession plan is, how the shares are going to be set up and organized, it might be better to put that in the hands of true professionals that are going to do everything from A to Z. But there's no one right answer. Even just by having the will, making that choice, am I going to have an executor who's a friend or a family friend or a spouse, or am I going to have a trustee? The majority of Canadians don't even do that. Get to
right,
that point
right,
to choose who's going to be the executor. So let's at least get to the point of having the will.
right. Right. Yeah, I think we've had some great takeaways, especially Kyle getting his file kind of cabinet organized. But David, we want to thank you for joining us here. Any final takeaways? Like I think you just had it there. Final leave behinds for the audience and the listeners is let's get to the will. But is there any other big kind of takeaways you want the listener here to walk away with?
It's just that especially for business owners, don't wait too long to do this because a lot of business owners wait until an emergency happens and then,
Right.
oh, I should have done it. So don't wait too long. The other thing is the other big challenge that you need to be thinking about is not planning for retirement. Yes, you've been building up the business, but you haven't really thought about what am I going to do after I get rid of the business or if I was to pass away, what am I going to do if I had to leave it tomorrow? Do you have enough money in put aside and you've planned for your retirement? And the third thing is understand the value of your business because what you might think your business is worth and what somebody else is willing to pay for it, that can have a huge
Sure. For sure.
change, a dynamic in terms of what's going to go forward in terms of the type of lifestyle that you're going to have based on what your business is worth. So if you can take care of those three areas. Don't wait so long. Plan for your retirement and understand the value of your business. And then follow along in terms of create the estate plan, the succession plan, prepare your executor, and then talk to your family with an open family conversations. Then you're going to just leave a legacy of love and order, and you'll
I
be
love it.
remembered for that.
I love it.
Awesome.
David, this has been so helpful, so informative, and the Canadian Wealth Secrets audience wants to thank you. Where can they go to find out more about your blueprint, about the other support that you offer in order for them to maybe take that next step? And let's be honest, as business owners, we're very, very, very busy, and therefore, I am commonly suggesting that people do seek out that additional support. You pay a small amount in order to be guided through the process. Where can they find out more about you and your blueprint?
You can just go to davidedey.com. On there you can buy my book. I've got free resources. I've got executor checklists that you would put in your red envelope so that you know that the executor knows exactly what they need to do. And then I've also got a legacy readiness quiz, and it asks you a bunch of questions and it gives you a score so you know what you need to work on. And you can just reach out to me. I'll be starting a new family blueprint. Well, you can get the course or you can get the blueprint from me. It's now in new printing now, but they just can reach out to me on my website or at LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, I'm there answering.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Appreciate
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And Kyle, you know what you need to do.
I do. Well, I have a funny feeling I'm going to be knocking on your door for that blueprint because I'm going to need the hand holding for sure just to get it done. And I think
Okay,
there's a lot of
Kyle.
others like
Okay.
that.
See what I'm doing for you, John? See what I'm doing?
Yeah, you're helping out. You're helping
Yeah.
out.
Okay, great. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, my friends. Before you head off there, David, we've got a couple questions in the chat. Maybe we'll do a little bit of Q&A if you've got a few minutes here. Sunil's asking some tax efficient strategies for inheritance. He's got the principal home, which most Canadians are well aware of, is a tax efficient vehicle to hang on to, and it's no capital gains there. Of course, tax-free savings account. Also mentions whole life insurance. Those are some vehicles. Anything else he's asking that you've got up your sleeve that people might be wanting to think about looking into?
Well, not knowing Sunil's whole total situation, I would have that conversation with the accountant and also the lawyer. First off, does he have a will? And then you would look at in terms of, is there ways I can defer taxes? Does it make sense depending on your family situation? Should I have some trusts? It would all depend on the size of the estate and what's his goal. Do you have a secondary property, investment properties, those sort of things? That's where the insurance would come in to offset that, and also trusts, and speak to somebody, an accountant or a lawyer, to see which would be most tax efficient to have the trust. Who would the trustees be, and take into consideration what would the taxes be on the trust every year. Again, it would depend on the size of the estate and the amount of assets that they hold.
Yeah, that definitely great response there. And, we've had chats on our podcast as well as with clients around, the idea of a trust. There's so many factors that, come into it. The size of the estate in general is going to be one of them. Are we selling the business, and then of course, what's that going to look like and sound like, over time? Is that estate freeze something that makes sense to be doing over that 21-year period? So great question there from Sunil. Sunil, you've kind of highlighted some of those common tax efficient strategies that are, I'll call it, more accessible for all. And then you can kind of go up that ladder as your estate gets larger into the trust realm.
The one thing I would add, Kyle, based on the questions that Sunil is asking, now I would go to a lawyer. This is not a do-it-yourself online will estate setup. Don't try to do this yourself. This, you need to sit down with professionals. Yes, it might cost a little bit more, but the couple of $1,000s that you're paying out to have it done properly will save your estate millions of dollars probably, and also a lot of grief going forward.
Right. 100%. 100%. Do you see any others in the chat there,
Yeah,
John?
there's one more here from Electron Recycler. I'll read it word for word here. Other than the beneficiaries, who will police, or what is included in the inventory for probate? Vehicles, for example, or things that don't actually require a grant of probate to access to avoid unnecessary probate fees.
I don't understand. What else do they need to?
I'm wondering, he just popped his camera on there. Do you want to maybe verbalize that just to kind of be a little more clear? It sounds like basically you're looking for like which things are going to be something that may get held up in probate,
right,
which won't. And I think the corporate will, David, if you want to maybe talk a little bit about why that second will or that dual will part is helpful for the corporate business owners that are out there.
It would be tax efficient. Again, not knowing everybody's situation. That's where I would say sit down, and because we're just having this quick thing here. So it may, in some cases, it may not make sense to do it, to have the second will, but I would talk to a professional who knows the ins and outs of your whole situation, and then you can make the decision there. I don't want to just say willy-nilly just out what you should do, if you get what I'm saying.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would say too as well, and totally agreed with David, like you want to make sure your situation makes sense. The one application of that corporate will that's helpful is that it actually sort of separates the probate process for your personal assets, and it separates what will happen with the shares of the company and what will happen there, so that you won't get vehicles in a corporation sort of tied up in your own personal probate situation. So that would probably be a good starting point. Whereas if you only have the one will, then some this question's probably more relevant where, there's going to be things that are going to potentially get caught up in terms of, who do they go to, who do the shares go to, all of those types of things sort of come into play.
That's why I say that as most, a lot of people want to do it yourself. That scenario, you need to go sit down in an office with a professional that you either know of or been referred to, so that they can understand your full situation and be open and honest of what you're solving for. What is it at the end of you signing the papers, what do you hope to accomplish for your family going forward? And then they'll guide you in the right direction.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sticking around and answering a few questions from the audience. And
My pleasure.
Yeah, we appreciate you as we said earlier, and looking forward to connecting soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. And Kyle, you know what you need to do.
Absolutely. So thanks everyone for joining us here. And to those who are going to listen to this on the podcast, looking forward to hearing some feedback, and hopefully David, you'll be hearing from others like me who have filing cabinets that need a little bit of work.
Sure.
Thanks very much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.